News.
Recording in progress.
Recording in progress. Welcome, one and all. We're on Daf Chafam at Aleph, and we're really on the precipice of a very, very complicated sugya that's going to require several shiurim just to introduce it. And this shiur, while it will seem like part of it is a chazar, what we talked about on Shavuos, is actually also the run-up to what we'll get to for this very, very complicated sugya, arguably the most complicated sugya in all of Masechet Rosh Hashanah. We can do it. We did many complicated sugyas in other Masechtas over the years. We'll do it, but I'm prepping you. Should be aware. The issue on the table is that Ula came to Chutz La'aretz and he said, we did something really great for you in Chutz La'aretz. We added an extra day to Elul. We made it a 30-day month instead of a 29-day month. Normally, Elul is 29 days, and the next day is the first day of the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. But we did it for you, something like that. We had, just review, we had the whole Gemara discussing why was that they had to add, why is adding for the advantageous? And we talked about different issues. One of them has to do with fresh vegetables. The other one has to do with the dignity of corpses that need to be buried. And whether it's Yom Kippur and Shabbos that are flush up against each other, where the issue is much more about the burial, or whether it's Shabbos Yom Tov together, where the issue would be the picking of fresh vegetables for Simchat Yom Tov as opposed to wilted vegetables. And we talked about the fact that if the issue is just Yom Tov, so the truth is they could reconstitute the vegetables by putting them in hot water. We had a whole thing like that, right? And then
Reconstitute the corpse too.
we reconstitute the corpse. That was very nice. So it's amazing action. So that's what we saw last time. In that context, we saw a few statements, and that's what we were talking about last time. First, Rabbah bar Shmuel, who says that we do not engage in being ma'aber the chodesh. We simply don't. I mean, it's questionable because the Gemara just said, Ula said that they did do that. So he says, no, we don't. You know why we don't? Because when the Torah describes that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hachodes zelachem, Rosh Chodashim, Hachodes hazeh, implies like someone's pointing. So Rashi there points out Nitkasha Moshe, based on the Medrash. Moshe was not sure what the Levana b'chidusha looked like. We'll talk about more about that Medrash another time. That's one we all know. And Hashem told him, so to speak, Kazeh Re'eva Kadesh. See this and sanctify it. But in this Gemara, those three words, Kazeh Re'eva Kadesh, see this and sanctify it, is understood by Rabbah bar Shmuel to mean when you see it, you need to sanctify the moon on that day. You cannot decide, well, we'll just add a day because it's more convenient. It doesn't work that way. It's an inflexible system because it has to do with whenever the moon is ready, that's the new month. And the baiting is meant to reflect, if you will, the light of the moon. If they're seeing the light of the moon, they're reflecting the light of the moon. Yeah, that's it. You see it? Announce. Get the witnesses in. We quiz them. Agreed. Makudish and Makudish, and it's a new month. Finished. Rava pointed out that no, the truth is we're not going to go to the extreme of pretending that we've seen the moon when we haven't. But if we've seen the moon, Kazeh Re'eva Kadesh, see the moon, Kazeh Re'eh, and you want to decide you want to add an extra day by pausing before the declaration is formally made for some reason having to do with the issues of community, you haven't violated Kazeh Re'eva Kadesh. Kazeh Re'eh, you see it. V'Kadesh doesn't mean it has to be the next thing you do. Maybe it's a day later. So Rava wants to argue, well, the Beit Din is not going to lean on the L-E-A-M, lean, maybe even literally, on the witnesses and tell them, did you see it? When they really didn't say, are you sure you didn't see it? Well, I didn't see it. Would it have looked like that? I guess it would have. So it could look like that. So it's possible you saw it. They're not going to do that. But if they need to delay, they could receive the witnesses, accept their testimony, but not actually make the declaration for an extra day. So what's that? That's me'uber. They added an extra day and made it a 30th day of that outgoing month. And maybe that's what happened in that Elul. So that was what we saw last time. Then we saw a statement of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says that he backs up this idea. To say what Rava said, Rava lives later, right? Rava is living later era than Rabbi Shua ben Levi. And Rabbi Shua ben Levi, we say, oh yeah, Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, Ma'aymin la'avar, we could go, la'aber, to go past, in order to delay it, but we're not going to be makadesh it early if they didn't really see the moon. So then the Gemara says, really? We have a testimony from Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, who told Rabbi Ami that he remembers that Rabbi Yochanan was me'ayem. He did intimidate the witnesses, cajole them, persuade them, and lean on them until they said that they saw the moon, even though it was actually not something that they saw, which all of us, I think, rightly said. But I think the whole point was truth-telling. So what kind of truth is that? They're making it up, playing fast and loose with it. But that was Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya's claim. And it's hard to reconcile that statement with the statements that you have before. People are saying either no, you can never change anything with it. When you see it, you must sanctify immediately, and that's the end of it. Or if you see it, you can delay it, but you can't make stuff up. And then we have finally Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya saying to Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Yochanan was actually engaged in this on a regular basis. So the Gemara mitigates this into this sort of conundrum. First, Abaye points out, and maybe there's a distinction between the two most important months of the Jewish calendar, because they're both Rosh Hashanah, Nisan, and Tishrei. Maybe for those, there are very important reasons to calibrate things in such a way that things will fall out in a certain pattern. See under Pesach, whenever you do it, Shavuot's going to flow from there because you're just going to count up 49 days. Day 50 is going to be Shavuot. And Rosh Hashanah, Tishrei is going to be Yom Kippur and Sukkot, so that's going to flow from there. That's where most of the holidays, the only biblical holidays, are found. Abaye says, well, Haba Nisan, Haba Tishrei. When there's two understandings of what that means. Haba Nisan, Haba Tishrei. What do you mean by that expression? We'll see that inside in 2 minutes. I'm just giving you the overview. And then Rava said, well, I don't think we got to Rava last time. We'll see him inside a minute. I'll tell you outside. Rava said, that first opinion that was so inflexible was Rabbah Bar Shmuel, who said, you can never change anything. Kazer Re'eva Kadesh means whenever they see it, that's when they testify, and that's the end of it. And we're not calibrating anything. That opinion must hold like someone who's known as Acherim. Acherim's other name was Rabbi Meir, which is an interesting name because his rabbi was Acher. But they didn't mean it was right. One of his rebbeim was Elisha ben Avuya. But when it comes to Rabbi Meir, we don't mean it in a pejorative sense. Acher means like others say. It's kind of like when someone says, they say. When I was younger, I used to claim that I'm the they and they say, because it's usually making it up. So it's like, they say, right? So he was Acherim. And whenever the Gemara Mishnah uses the expression, Acherim means Rabbi Meir. What did Rabbi Meir hold? Rabbi Meir held that there is an oscillation between 29-day months and 30-day months throughout the year. It's very simple. And it's so structured, Rabbi Meir claimed, that there will be a difference from year to year between 1 year's Shavuot and another year's Shavuot, between 1 year's Rosh Hashanah and the next year's Rosh Hashanah, a discrepancy of 4 days of the week. So whatever day Shavuot was this year, according to Rabbi Meir, in 1 year from now, you'll know exactly what day it starts. It's just count 4 days later on the calendar. That day of the week, in other words, obviously the same date. Rosh Hashanah fell out on a Monday, so next year it'll fall out on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Okay, it'll be 4 days later. That's what he held. Okay, therefore, if you hold that sort of regimented, inflexible way of looking at things, then Kazereva Kadesh, because it's just going to go back and forth no matter what. That's how you're going to see it. It'll always be organized that way, and it'll be fine, so to speak. In a leap year, there'll be an extra day, a 5-day discrepancy from year to year in terms of the day of the week, because that extra, when you calculate it up, so there's normally 50 weeks in a lunar calendar. Solar's 52, but a lunar year is 354 days and change. So 350, that's 50 times 7. You're left with 4 days. If you add an extra month, everything's going to be pushed off by a day for the next year. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. That's what he held. That's what we got to pretty much last time. I think we didn't do the Rava's Shita, but we're going to do more about that now. I want to see it inside, but I just wanted to give you the overview. The whole thing starts with one question. When Ula showed up and he said, "Oh, we did this for you in Eretz Yisrael," well, what is he talking about? something they could not have possibly done, something, well, they absolutely did do, and here's why. They actually had more flexibility they didn't exercise, but he was signaling that this was one of the things that they did, and there are other things they could have done. What's the situation? I just want to give you the overview of it. Larry, I feel like you had a question already.
Yeah, I'm afraid to ask.
Well, don't be afraid. It's a question. What's the worst that could happen?
Pasuk says you fix the month by seed. But I'm not clear, and I'm going over, I'm not clear. You can't go back, but how can you defer? And that's A. And B, why can't you just fix it once? And then, depending upon how long the year is, some months will be 29 and some months will be 30.
Good. Well,
How do you know how long the year is going to be until you know how long each month is?
well,
The definition of the year is the sum of all the days of the time.
but you need a sum total. You have a sum total. A year is still the same number of days.
No, it's not. It's not as
Not a lunar year. A leap when it's a leap year.
By definition, our calendar, we have different numbers.
Lunar versus the solar. Yeah. Yeah.
We recognize we don't have Aiden coming to Yerushalayim today.
Right.
We recognize that there is a calendar and there is, if you will, an imperfection of the calendar because you have to have a leap year. Now, the solar calendar has to have a leap year also. But Ed Reingold's an expert on this and
Calendrical calculations. He's the author of the book.
Yeah.
With his partner, Dershowitz. Not Alan Dershowitz, some other person.
Cousin.
Just wondering. Is his cousin?
Yeah. So
You've asked a lot of questions. It's like a whole shear to answer just those questions, but they're excellent, important questions. I'll try to answer in the most succinct way possible. And
just picking up
No.
from where we left off.
right.
last
So
week.
just to remind you conceptually what's happening over here. There is an astronomical reality based on the Bria, so Hashem set things up. That astronomical reality is what governs time for us as Jews, as human beings. Astronomical means both lunar and solar, and we talked a little bit previously about reconciling the two when we talked about the seasons and Tkufot and the Mazalot, the constellations, how people understood the ancient sky and all of that. But now we're focusing on the moon. What the Torah sets up is that the conduit for the Jewish people to determine time is the high court of the Jewish people. Right now, we're not at the layer of there's a calendar. Forget that there's a calendar. It's a calendar now. Essentially, you could say as an historical exigency. To what extent it's an historical exigency is a discussion we kind of had already, and we'll come to again. Ayin Sham, the Rambam, the Ritva, others. I'm going to actually, when we go into the big sugya, I'm going to expand it even farther into more of a range of opinions. But let's just say the basic idea is Hashem empowered the Jewish people to be the final word on what the halachic reality will be, and to that the astronomical reality is on a certain level subservient to the halachic reality. And who determines the halachic reality? The high court of the Jewish people. Now, it doesn't mean that on the 8th of the month, on a whimsy, that it's going to say, we announce it's Rosh Chodesh. They can't do that because it's totally too far. It's too far afield from the reality of the astronomical. It would be, not only would it not be responsible, it's not really within their purview to do. The real area of decision making is in the transition from one month to the next. And I got to finish the sentence, no?
That's why I didn't.
Oh, okay. There's Davka, the halachic reality in a certain way supersedes the astronomical reality. And the question behind all of this is, how far does the koach of the Chachamim extend? So their job is not to simply, according to most of the opinions we've seen, their job is not to be an observatory that is seeing what is happening and just announce it. They're not just a pass through, but they're actually the legislative body that sets the clock. And how they set the clock, I don't mean in hours, but in days of the month, is going to be determined by not just the consideration of what the astronomical heavenly, by heavenly, I don't mean Shamayim in the spiritual sense. I mean in the sense of the sky, what's going on in space. It's also what's going on with the people. And the reconciliation between what's going on high and what the people are up to or need to be up to is the job of the Beit Din. So to take that example that we've been focusing on, if Yom Kippur will fall out right after or right before Shabbos, it will be a big problem halachically to bury the dead. And we don't know what we would do. So therefore, the Chachamim, since they have a certain juridical authority, they can exercise that. That's what it is. It's true. To move the calendar by a day, we think it's just to defer, but it turns out some opinions want to hold even to make it one day earlier. And you say, but that's such a lie. It's a lie, sorry, if their job is just to be a pass-through as reporters. If they're media, then their job is not to insert their own opinion or their own considerations. It's to be as objective as possible to the reality and report on it. And what's the mechanism for that? Bring in the witnesses, we quiz them, we announce Mekudesh. But most of these opinions don't hold that way. They hold that's true to some extent, but there's some area still of ambiguity baked in. And it was the keys were handed over by the Ribono Shel Olam to the Sanhedrin Agadol in Yerushalayim to decide, actually in Eretz Yisrael, I should say, not Yerushalayim, to decide how that's going to go. Forget that you know that there's a calendar. The calendar is after. And even that, as you're pointing out, it's not that it has imperfections that there are leap years. It's that the leap years are actually now baked into the calendar. So it happens there's an imperfection anyway, as Ed Ryan will tell you, which they didn't think was going to be an issue because they had it in mind for that we need it for 10 years, for 20 years, maybe 50 years. But it's not going to be longer than that. Obviously, we're going to go back. It'll be fine. And here we are. It's 2025, 5785. It's still going. Okay, can I take one other question and come back to you? Was this helpful at all?
The whole thing is helpful.
I'm saying, but I just wanted this, gave you the conceptual sort of 30,000 feet. That's what's happening. The Chachamim are in between the Bria that Hashem set up and the people that Hashem set up to be his representatives.
If I may summarize, what I'm taking away from this
Mhm.
is that the maskana finally is, well, we have to base it on aiding, but there are exigencies and needs that have to be dealt with. And therefore there's koach ben and
Yeah.
we're gonna use that
Yeah.
flexibility.
Yeah. Leadership has to make tough decisions. Yeah.
But I'm not clear on why they can defer rather than.
So that has to do with the fact that at least one of the drushes was this pasuk, or rather not pasuk, but the drusha, that's the halachic drusha, kazera eva kadesh. If you read it homiletically, as Rashi explains it, Hashem was telling Moshe, you don't know what a new moon looks like? That's what it looks like. Kazeh re'eva kadesh. But on a halachic level, some took that to mean when you see it like this, you must sanctify it. Some said sanctify it immediately. Some said when you see this, then you can sanctify it. And yet others want to argue, and this says, forget those three words in the Medrash Halacha, just decide. Decide that you saw it and decide that you're announcing it. You can't do it on the 20th of the month or the 17th of the month, but you can do it. You have that latitude. That's the koach that was given to Chachamim by Hashem.
Shmuel is machloket. That's not who we're following.
Right, we seem to follow the other opinions. We'll see inside presently. Yeah, Jeff, please.
This kind of discretion came into play, like you got, let's say, several days in a row where it's cloudy, you can't see the moon.
Yeah.
Around the time of the month. We got to make a call sometime. Like it's
right. In a way, that ends up being easier and harder.
Yeah.
Easier because they know proof positive because they're counting the days. If day 30 has come and no witnesses show up, then that night they announce the new month automatically because there's no 31st day of any month. Day 31 equals day 1 of the new month, no matter what. That's easier. Harder is one of the issues apparently that would come up was people would sometimes think they were seeing the moon when they're seeing some kind of a wisp of a cloud. And you say, well, I never had that problem. Well, first of all, you don't spend that much time looking at the sky at night, but also a lot of this was taking place davka bein hashmashot. As the sun is setting, it's kind of light, kind of dark, the things on the horizon. Maybe I saw it, maybe I didn't. Which sky did you see it in? What were the buildings in the foreground when you saw it in the background? And that really was a consideration. So if it's heavy cloud cover, that's one thing. But if it's wispy clouds and pieces, that's another. But assuming it's all completely covered, so you're right, exactly. And in that case, it would be much easier for the Chachamim to announce Mekudesh Mekudesh. Oh, did the witnesses come? Yes, witnesses came and they announced. What happened in the back room to get them to cajole them to say that? You're going to see a line in the Gemara now. It's going to say Machzek Shikra. Looks like a lie. It's going to say it. I just didn't get there yet, but I'm prepping it. But right, but it's right, and it has to do with again the fact that the role of the Chachamim in terms of the Sanhedrin Gadol was not simply to tell us what we already know. It was to make a decision. Sometimes it was to tell us what we already know. Sometimes it was to shape the reality around the halachic needs of the Jewish people, the national needs, which are the Torah needs, and even if that meant it would supersede in some way, the astronomical reality. Or we'll see it inside. Just to fly through the Gemara, so I want to tell you a few of the Rishonim about this. I glossed over all of them. We'll see some Rashi, Tosfot, Turi Evan, the next thing that we'll see as well. But that's the basic gist of what we saw last time. So I thought to review it because otherwise you can't understand what's going on tonight. So look at I'm going back again. It's like we didn't learn anything on Shavuos, or we did, but now hopefully it's sinking in, hopefully in some way. Okay, so I'm on the last of the narrow lines on page Chaf Amud Aleph. Okay. Kiata Ula Amar 28. Yeah. Kiata Amar. Ibru Kiata Ula Amar. Ibru Elu. They made Elul the 30-day month. Amar Ula Yadi Chavrin Bavloi Maitivuta Avdinan Hadaihu. You should know what a great thing, dear friends in Bavel. You should know what they did for you in Eretz Yisrael. Maitivuta Ula Amar Mishum Yarkaya. What was the good thing that was done? Right. That the rule is talking about. So either it could be Mishum Yarkaya, right? Rav Acha Bar Chanina Amar Mishum Mataya, right? So it was either the issue was Ula thinks it was about vegetables. Rav Acha Bar Chanina thinks it has to do with burying the dead. My benai, what's the practical case where there's any difference between these two considerations? Ika benayu Yom Kippur Shechal Yot Achar Shabbat Madam Mishum Mataya Ma'abrinan. Let the guy pick the vegetables at night. When is he going to need them? At night. That's when he should pick the vegetables. But the body should not be waiting 2 whole days. Shabbos, Yom Kippur, or Yom Kippur, Shabbos. Therefore, that had to be done right away. Ulamanda Amar Yarkaya, the one who holds that it's vegetables, that's the issue. La'abre, you're not eating on Yom Kippur anyway. So, right? So, what's the issue? No. So the one who says Yarkaya le'abri should be uber to make it a space of a day in between Shabbos and Yom Tov. Well, that's Mishum Mataya. Sorry, I messed that up. Ulamanda Amar Mishum Yarkaya li'abre Mishum Mataya. Let the one who holds Yarkaya, since he can wait, he doesn't care if it's Shabbos and Yom Kippur and Shabbos. He should concede that we want to be ma'abarit for the bodies. So the Gemara says no, it must be another case where they really argue. Ela'ika beinayu. What's the difference between them, where they would argue Yom Tov Samach l'Shabbat, bein l'faneh, bein la'achareh, whether before or after. Manda Amar Mishum Yarkaya ma'abrina, Manda Amar Mishum Mataya efshar v'amameh. So if you hold that the issue is the vegetables, so you want to keep a day in between Shabbos and Yom Tov on either side of it to enable people to pick fresh vegetables for the day of Kodesh. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck with wilted vegetables the second day. But the one who said about the corpses, non-Jews could bury the dead on Yom Tov. That's actually a halacha. So Amanda Amar Mishum Mataya le'abrei Mishum Yarkaya. So why don't the people who say that's for corpses, in the case of Shabbos, Yom Tov, Shabbos, in those cases, so let them concede to the other group that for the vegetables, sake of vegetables. So they answer, Efshar bechamime. You can fix the vegetables by reconstituting and put them in boiling water, and everything is fixed with the vegetables. So the Gemara says, Ihachi maishnol didan, afilo didhu, nami. So if Ula showed up in Bavel and he said, "Oh, an Israeli did it for you," how's that actually the case? And if this is a circumstance that for the vegetables you could you put them in the hot water or something like that. So what's the issue? So Israel also has that same issue. L'didan chavilan alma, l'didhu lo chavilahu alma. So there's more airflow in Eretz Yisrael somehow. It's not as hot. The atmosphere is not as thick. And therefore, the vegetables don't wilt as quickly. and therefore in Israel they don't care if it's Shabbos Yom Tov or Yom Tov Shabbos. They'll keep it for 2 days, not going to go bad. But in Chutz La'aretz, in Bavel, which is the only Chutz La'aretz at the time that is a significant Jewish community that Ula is visiting, it's much hotter and things fall to pieces in vegetable land. So therefore, we want to put a day in between. And then the Gemara said, Aini, is that true? Is that true what Ula said? Is that really possible? Ula announcing triumphantly, we helped you in Eretz Yisrael. V'hatani Rabba bar Shmuel, Yachol Kishem Shema Abim Shana L'tzorach Kach Abim Chodesh L'tzorach. Just as you add a month to the year, if need be, to fix it, you add a month of Adar. So you might think that that's also true to be Ma'aber the Chodesh, to add a day to the month for a need. Talmud Lomar, therefore we learn, Hachodes Zelachem, Rosh Chodashim. The Torah said, this month is for you, Rosh Chodashim. Kazeh Ra'eva Kadesh. See it like this and sanctify it, meaning immediately and without delay. So Amarava Lokashia. No, that's not a contradiction between what Rabba Bar Shmuel said and what Ula had said. What Rabba Bar Shmuel was trying to argue is that there might be a circumstance where you can delay, but not a circumstance where you could do something in an earlier way, right? Lo kacha kan le'abro, kan le'kadsho, v'achika amar. This is really what Rabbi Bar Shmuel is trying to say. Now, I showed this as two different opinions because in the end, it's not clear that Rabbi Bar Shmuel actually agrees with Rava's interpretation of Rabbi Bar Shmuel. It's what Rava says, Rabbi Bar Shmuel said. Rava says, v'achika amar. This is what he meant to say. Yachol kashem shema abim rashan of et hachodesh l'tzorach kach mekadshin et hachodesh l'tzorach. You might have thought that just as you are ma'aber, means you're deferring the year by adding an extra month, or deferring the month by adding an extra day for a need. So too, mekachin chodesh l'tzorach means you can make the Kiddush Hachodes happen early. You might have thought that. Talmud Lamai. Therefore, we learn Hachodes Zelachem. This month is for you. Kazeh Rosh Re'eva V'Kadesh. See it like this. Sanctify it like this.
So adding an extra month, meaning adding Adar.
Adding Adar or adding an extra day to a month. That's what Rava says. Rabba Bar Shmuel meant that you could do, but Rabba Bar Shmuel was simply saying Kazeh Re'eva Kadesh means you can't precede. You can't pretend that the witnesses saw something when they didn't see it. But if they did see it, you could put a time delay on when the actual announcement gets made by a whole day, so that Yom Kippur will not, Shabbos will not fall out before or after a Yom Tov. Yep. No, but by going back, I'm going back in time. I mean, on the night of the 29th, the 29th comes to a close, and you go into the night of the 30th. The Beit Din convenes with two witnesses, and they come out and they say, "Oh, tomorrow morning we're going to announce that that today is Rosh Chodesh. The 30th is the beginning of the new month." But what happened in the back room? Maybe the witnesses said, "I didn't see anything. You sure you didn't see anything?" And they push them and intimidate them until the witnesses finally say, "Okay, we did see something." And then they do announce that that's the Rosh Chodesh. When I meant backwards, I didn't mean you're going back in time. I meant you can't make it earlier. You can't make the month happen earlier. So they're trying to say, but you can make the month be deferred.
But whatever, they refuse.
So we haven't gotten to the nitty gritty of what actually goes on in the room. We're going to come to it in a few pages. So I table that because what does that mean? I didn't really get into that detail. The assumption is they threaten them, intimidate them somehow. What does that mean? Literally, like they're beating them? No, they're not beating them. Waterboarding them? Not waterboarding them. There's something about how they structure things to make it work. No, love dafka. Yeah, there is such a concept, but that's not going on here. That does involve more coercive methods, by the way. So yeah, according to Rabbi, at least. Yeah.
We assume that Sanhedrin have the knowledge, but still needs to rely on the 280.
Yeah. Okay, they're relying on 280 because that's the procedure.
So how can a dean come before Sanhedrin if they didn't see anything?
Right. So that we have to come to in a few pages. We're going to talk about what happens in the room. Who are these Adim? What are we doing with them? What are we asking them really to do and to say? Yeah, but what some of this question turns on is it turns on the question of how much do the Chachamim really know already about the reality of the calendar. And this was it was a halachic necessity because that's the mitzvah of how you do it, but not because they really didn't know. It's kind of like, to borrow a very well-known example, Sveika Dioma doesn't actually mean that we're not really sure when a Yom Tov is today. We call it that. It's the name of it. Sarbanes-Oxley. I always go back to that one. It's a rule. The Congress made a rule. That's it.
Member of Sanhedrin can be an aide.
The question there as well, if that's possible. A question if they can have one of the members of the Sanhedrin to be a witness. Also, discussion coming up. Right now, we're talking just about the sequence and the possibility that someone could force it to be earlier. If the Beit Din could make it be earlier, come in a day early or come in a day late. And so far, we're saying, okay, you could do it a day late. V'chihad the Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. You have same for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi as well. Ma'amin ala edim ala chodesh shenira bizmano leabro. Ve'ein ma'amin ala edim ala chodesh shalonira bizmano lekadsho. You can't be makadosh a chodesh they didn't see. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi makes the most sense to us. Yeah, I mean maybe at least the second part, but not being ma'ayim them to the night before they didn't actually see. Ira, please.
Why would we think that that would be acceptable by not seeing it? I mean, what they're just gonna lie and say, okay, yeah, we saw it, but we really didn't see it.
Yeah.
Next line. Aini, is that true? Is that true? V'hashalach le Rabbi Yehuda Nesil Rabbi Ami. Havu Yodin shekoyim av Rabbi Yochanan hayam lamdenu ma'aymin ala edim al hachodesh shaloni Rabbi Zmano lekadshom. Afu b'shlo ra'u yomru ra'inu. Rabbi Yochanan during his life he taught us. It says Rabbi Yehuda Nesil, the message Rabbi Ami. He taught us that you can intimidate the witnesses on a month because they did not actually see the moon at that time yet. Even though they never saw it, they can say they saw it, and it'll go through.
So it's not that they're Eidim Zomim. So it's not that they're false witnesses or Eidei Sheker.
Right, which is a good question, right? Is that weird? So that's the black box I have not opened. We're not going to get there for the 5 more pages. What exactly is going on in the room what is ma'aymin? They're telling them to say something that's not true?
Right.
Very strange.
But somebody else asked before, what are they doing there if they didn't think they saw the moon?
Exactly.
They have a few people who are on staff. They work there. They're clerks. You bring them in. We need your help. We got to do this. You got this now. Right. In fact, I will tell you one of the Rishonim. I think it's it might be Rabbeinu Chanal here. Says it's not that literally they didn't see. It's that they're really not 100% sure. They came in and they said, "We think we saw," and the sages say, "What do you mean you think you saw? You think you saw? You did see." And they really needed them to say they saw. So they'll go easy on them. They're not really going to give them a real faher to find out. Then suddenly one of the witnesses says, I'm not really sure. I don't think I want to put my name on this. You want to put your name on this. Trust me, you want to put your name on this. Yeah, they're leaning on them. Now, does the Iyum mean we're going to kill you? That's not what they're saying to them. But they're right. One of the Rishonim says it's a question of a lack of certitude for this very reason. Because it's very hard to understand. What are you making stuff up that never happened?
Yeah.
The point of the court is midvar sheker tirchak. So what are they doing? Yeah.
But that's an easy case where they're super. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But how can someone comes and says, I didn't see anything, doesn't come. 2 guys, they pick up 2 guys off the street. What did you see? I didn't see anything.
I didn't see nothing.
So they're not Eidim.
Right.
And what constitutes an aid? So the question is, you have to be there's certain
A certain stipulation, there's certain rules for who can be an aid. And
that famous psychology experiment, like hundreds of years in advance, where they have the person and they have all the other people saying, we saw the line, it's this big, and even though the line is really
Right,
big,
right.
is influenced by
it was all the other people saying it.
Yeah.
It could be something like that. Again, there's a discussion among the Rishonim. Maybe it means they were really in doubt about what was transpiring, or they somehow wanted to recant on the testimony. It's very hard to understand that they literally made something up out of whole cloth. By the way, that was the testimony, at least on the pshat level of the Gemara. That is exactly the testimony of Rabbi Yochanan. Obviously, other Chachamim disagreed with this idea. They didn't like this idea. They couldn't accept it. Yeah, right.
You think that the presence of the Sanhedrin, which was the highest court in the land, would keep people from playing games? You know what I mean?
Right.
They'll come with.
That alone is pressure.
And to say that they didn't see it, then just what we said, they shouldn't come to Beit Din at all. And the question is, sometimes you see a sliver and you don't know what you see, and that's maybe. That's why I ask if one of the Shoftim
One of the Shoftim team and two of the Shoftim team maybe could actually serve as the witnesses as well, but they can't be part of the Sanhedrin.
Because
Right.
they
Right,
know
right.
that-
These are not two Adam. They just whisk two guys off the street. You, come with me in the back room. We have to talk to you. What about? We'll tell you when you get there. No, it's like a constituted Bezdin today generally has Adam on staff. They have people. That's their job. They witness things that happen. That's what they do.
But there has to be criteria in order to be an A.
To have to be kosher Adam, but maybe they work. I was not being tongue in cheek. They might just work on the Harabayit and they're called in. Could you please help us? We need two people to serve
Sure.
as Adam. Not necessarily actual, So, but the point is, and what we're struggling with is, are they really making a juridical determination about something, which is to report on a reality, or are they in a certain way fulfilling the mitzvah that there needs to be a certain procedure, a formal procedure for the court to make its declaration, but ultimately the power of deciding when to make that decision is done by the court. It's in the hands of the court. That's the debate. Some of the Chacham saying, well, no, they just can't do that. They just have to report whatever they see. Rabbah bar Shmuel, at least the Pshat Rabbah bar Shmuel. And then Rabbah said, no, what he really meant was you could defer because Kazera A, put an ellipsis, Vikadesh. And others, and Rabbi Shimon Levi says it that way, right? So, but you can't do this shtick where you're going to do the day before you're going to talk to two Adam. Again, stop thinking of the Adam as two random people who are shopping, in Super Sol, and they grab them, and Rami Levy, come in, we have to talk to you, and we'll let you go as soon as you give us the answer we want. It's not like that. It's people who work in the Bezdin. They probably know the whole calendar system also. It's almost like, I'll give you, it's a harsh example, but it is true, let's say someone's converting to Judaism, okay? They know the person's name already. They ask them the person's name when they came in the room. But they write out a star. Then they read the star to them, and they realize, oh, they don't speak Hebrew. They read the star in Hebrew. Then they read them the star in English. Do you so-and-so freely accept? And they read them the Hebrew name. And they say, is that your name? There's like a pause because it's the new Jewish name. They weren't Jewish before. Unless the English name was like, was Judah, and now they're going to be Yehuda. So that's obvious. But sometimes it's not related. So you have to ask them. Isn't that a formality? You already knew the answer. But there's a certain procedure of how things work. Okay. Now, that's what I'm talking about in terms of maybe the Beit Din's role is to formalize in a certain procedure what is essentially their decision. And the question turns on when the words Kazera Iva Kadesh, is that a halachic expression that means you need to see it in order to make the declaration? Or is it that you need witnesses to say they saw it? Doesn't matter if they actually saw it. Will they say they saw it? That's what you're supposed to do. Because really, who's holding the cards? The court's holding the cards because they have to make decisions in the national interest, national halachic interest, and they're the high courts. So that's what they're doing. They're not making it up out of whole cloth. They're doing the procedure. This is what a Beit Din does. They know what the answers are, but they ask pro forma. They ask the person almost like a play, back and forth. They give them a script. You read your part, I read my part, back and forth. There's something to that, yeah.
But there is therefore with these professional aiding on staff,
Let's say,
there's no requirement they actually saw the Areach.
according to one of the opinions here, Rabbi Yochanan, nobody to sneeze at, who's right down the line. The report is that he apparently taught his students that if it was necessary, you could intimidate the witnesses. Whatever that word intimidate means. We know what it means today, but does it literally mean that then? To report that they saw it, even if in truth they didn't actually see it. Now, that doesn't mean they asked them to lie outright. They're saying, did you see anything? Oh, we saw some clouds in the sky. You saw some clouds. They look like this? I'm not sure. Think again. Does it? Okay, it looked like that. And why are they doing that? They're trying to come to a certain endpoint. In other words, who's really holding the cards about when Rosh Chodesh is going to be? The Chachamim. The fact that the moon is going to line up, that's just a guideline for them. And if it doesn't work for them because the needs of the people, because Yom Tov and Shabbos together, Yom Kippur and Shabbos together, so they'll just announce, no, we're changing it. Because that's the koach that Hashem gave to Jewish people. That's that Gemara that I mentioned already on Shavuos. Everyone knows by heart. The Malachim ask Hashem, when's Rosh Hashanah? What does Hashem say? Ani lo yodea. Have to ask the court in Yerushalayim. What do you mean you don't know? Hashem made the world. You know when everything's going to be. You know everything's going to be in the future. What are you talking about? No, so I gave it to them. They have to decide. And even if they make a mistake and it's not actually astronomically correct, it's still going to work. How come? That's what they decided. We'll come to that Mishnah further along, right? That's Rabbi Yeshua and Rabban Gamliel about carrying the walking stick on the day that he calculated it was Yom Kippur. So he told him, "You're going to come on the day you think is Yom Kippur. You're going to carry the stick," and he did.
Yeah.
Why? Because he realized I'm definitely right. In my heart, I know I'm right, and my observation is right, and my argument is right, but I don't have the authority, and that's the guy with the authority, and I have to be subservient to him. And he did show his subservience to the Rosh Sanhedrin. So what happened to the Nasi. Yeah.
Did they deem have to swear that they saw it? I mean,
No, they had to make a declaration. No, yeah, that'll be a problem. No, they're not. They don't have. No, doesn't seem that they have to. No,
then it's a declaration.
we're gonna get to it. We didn't get to that part of the procedure yet. But here's this the sort of the sequencing. When we get to the next part of the Gemara, you have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up, right? From the bottom was Rabbi Yochanan Lamdinim Amin ala Edim ala Chodesh lo nira bismanu lekadsho af bish lo ra'u yom ra'inu. That says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from the bottom now. Amar Abaye, that's what we're up to. Abaye says Amar Abaye lo kashyap haba Nisan v'tishrei haba shar yarche. No, don't worry about it. Really, it must be that in Nisan and Tishrei, that's what Rabbi Yochanan, when you use Rabbi Yochanan, I mean, it's so important that Nisan and Tishrei work out for the Jewish people in the right way. We're even willing to go with the Rabbi Yochanan Shita, who only meant what he said, only in the Chodesh Nisan. But when we heard Rabbi Bar Shmuel, everything has to only be in order. Rabbi Shub and Levi, only in order, meaning Kazeh Re'eh, you could see it. You could still defer, but you can never, the night before you actually saw the moon, tell the witnesses, did you see it? No, you did. Okay, we did. That can never happen for other months. That was the second. Abashar Yache, that's all the other months other than Nisan and Tishrei. Rava Amar Hadatani Rava Bar Shmuel Acherim he. Rava then says, by the way, what Rava Bar Shmuel said is that the Shita of Acherim. Titania, Acherim Omrim, Ein Bein Atzeret Latzeret, Ve'ein Bein Rosh Hashanah Rosh Hashanah, Ela Dal Yom Bilvad. 4-day discrepancy between each of the year from year to year between Shmini from Shavuot to Shavuot and Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, right? V'imhaita Shana Mu'beret Chamisha. Then it'll be 5 days if it was a leap year for reasons we explained already. Rav Dimi Minaharda Matni Ipcha. Rav Dimi from Naharda learned it exactly the opposite way. Okay, which is 2 lines up from the bottom. Ma'amin ala edim ala chodesh shaloni Rabbi Zmanu lekadsho. We can intimidate the witnesses on a month where they have not yet seen the moon, that they did see the moon, i.e. on the Leil 30, 29 going into 30. But if they saw the moon, it was very visible and everybody did see it, we will not defer it to later. This is the exact opposite of everything we saw till now. My timer, top of the next page. The answer is Hay machzek shikra, Hay lo machzek shikra. Because one will be obviously a lie, and the other one is not obviously a lie. Top of the page, Rashi. Sheniret bizmana ve'enin me'idin harbe acherim yesh shera'u v'nira sha'al sheker ibruhu avak shelo ra'uhu v'amra'inu ein sheker noda. When the moon is seen on the night of the 30th, Leil 30, and everybody sees it, and only 2 people go in to make the testimony happen, but then no declaration comes that night, but every single person saw the moon. It was a perfectly clear night. Everybody knows it's Rosh Chodesh now because they saw it and it doesn't happen, so the word will get around. This is a total lie. They made it up. But if it was not seen by anyone, but 2 people come in and claim they did see it, in quotation marks, that claim they saw it, and the court says, oh, Taka, Leil 30 is actually Rosh Chodesh. Everyone was, oh, surprising. I didn't see it. Did you see it? I didn't see it. Well, those guys clearly saw it because the court declared that it's a new month. And this is like a head scratcher, right? Wait. So the whole thing is it going to be a public perception of a lie? That's what he says. That's what, according to Rav from Naharda, Rav Dimi Naharda, that is exactly what he says. One is going to be considered a lie, and one is going to not be considered a lie. So this is like, huh? Says the Turei Evan. The Turei Evan writes on this last thing that it sounds like Midin Torah. It is actually permissible to makadosh aber the month as you wish. It's totally up to Chachamim. And Rabbi Bar Shmuel holds like Rabbi Meir that al pi din Torah, the words Hachodes hazeh lachem rosh chodashim means kazeh re'eh v'kadesh. See it this way and sanctify it. There is no wiggle room. You're not in charge of deciding when the month is going to be. You know who decides? The moon decides. Not really, but if the moon is visible, that's what's going to decide. And if you failed, humanity, Yerushalayim, I'm putting it dramatically, failed to see the moon, that's on you. So then it'll have to be the next night.
That would be an astronomical mistake.
Yeah, right. Now for exactly.
No pun
For
intended.
it's good. But for other it's cute. It's very cute. But for Adar and Elul, there's no chash of Mechsek Shikra in those 2 months. And therefore ma'aber them litzorech, because normally they're 29 days, as Ula was announcing to the Bnei Bavel. He was telling them, oh, we added a day because when it comes to Adar and Elul, it's not, there's no problem there, says the Torah. It's not really a Machzik Shikra problem. They added a day, means that probably they didn't see it, something like that, because those 2 months are so incredibly important and so much is riding on them. I mean, talk about going from one end of the spectrum to the other, yeah? From one end of the spectrum to the other. By the way, the Rashba pointed out that the words Kazeh Re'eh V'Kadesh actually transpired in what month? When God told Moshe Rabbeinu, it wasn't Nisan? But then the Gemara says, well, when did Rabbi Yochanan say that they could play fast and loose and, I'm not fast and loose, not doing dereliction, tough because the responsibility for the time. When did they say that you can start in month Elul, but also was the other one? One was for Tishrei, and the other one was for Nisan, remember?
Yeah.
So the Rashba says, well, Kazeh Re'eh Kadesh was said in Nisan. So he answers, the Ritva says, the Ran says this, right? The drasha was not spoken about Nisan. When the drasha says Kazeh Re'eh Kadesh, it must not have been talking about Nisan. It was talking about other months. The Tosfot Rosh says, no, the whole pasuk in the first place is an asmachta, Kazeh Re'eh Kadesh, that has to be in some kind of sequence. The truth is that's just a din d'Rabbanan. And midoraita, they can decide whatever they want to decide. That's the koach that was given to them. And Tosfot here on the page, on where am I here? On 20a, Tosfot, the tiny little Tosfot. I'm looking at the time. We got like 7 minutes till davening. We got to go in also. So, ha b'nisan v'tishrei chafam ad aleph perish b'kuntris shamod tluyin bahan mekadshin litzorech b'shar yarchei lo v'yesh mefarshim ipcha. There are those who explain this exactly the opposite, that because Nisan and Tishrei are so important, that's when you could add a day, like Ula described, but you certainly can't go back a day because there we can't do it early. You could do it later, but you can't do it earlier because there for sure, Tos would say they have an understanding that Rabbi Yochanan didn't make his statement about flexibility in the months of Nisan and Tishrei because there's so many biblical holidays then. He only meant it for the Shar Yarchei. And Rabbi Shua ben Levi said for Nisan and Tishrei, if you need to, you could push it off one day, but not that you could do it earlier. The Rashba notes that in any case, everyone agrees, or at least admits, that if necessary, you could be ma'aber it mipnei atzorach. You could add a day for a need, because that's what it sounds like from what Ula said. And since Ula, no one's arguing Ula, you're wrong, that didn't happen. Ula's report is the baseline for the whole conversation. This happened in Yerushalayim. They added a day. They added a day. So Rabbi Shmuel, he meant about other months you can't add a day, but you can add a day when it comes to Chodesh Elul going into Tishrei. Or he meant, that's what he meant. He meant Kazeh Re'eh, and maybe you could delay before you say Vikadesh, before you actually add it in. Again, a very complicated Gemara. I guess we'll have to stop here after all. I had a whole other page we didn't get to with other things, but there's always next week. So Ad Khan and Ibn Shir. Ad Khan for